Okay, so as you all know, the organization I've been working with this semester is the Missouri Institute of Natural Science. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the newsletter tonight, the components that I wrote about, the audience and the goals for each component, and some of the challenges that I faced. So we'll just jump right into it by talking about the topics I chose. Number one, that's spacing. I screwed that one up. Number one is an outstanding volunteer, kind of the profile feature that we wrote earlier this semester. Then some legislative news that's relevant to the organization, industry trends for nonprofits, personal blog, and organizational news for the Missouri Institute of Natural Science. So, the first piece that I wrote is about an outstanding volunteer named Wayne Taylor. He's been volunteering with the Institute since 2009. And this is really written for an audience of potential visitors who are interested in what they might want to, like what experience they're going to actually have when they get to the museum, and the kind of people who are actually working there. Because in the piece it talks a whole lot about, he's very involved in leading the field trips and giving presentations, and he kind of runs a lot of the activities that go on. And then, interested in more of the people who work there. And the goal was to obviously appeal to more visitors by giving them a synopsis of what they would do if they were to visit, and to hopefully portray people that work there to portray them as personable and interesting, because some people might think that anyone who works with a bunch of fossils and stuff is too much of a history nerd to be entertaining, but that's not the case with Wayne. So the second piece that I wrote about is some legislative news. Admittedly, this might be a bit of a stretch, but the goal of this piece was to establish the institution as an educational organization, as opposed to just a museum where you go and you look at stuff. And so it's written for potential visitors who have kids who are still in elementary school, who are going through the Common Core system. And the challenge was identifying legislation that was actually relevant to the organization. So, yes, moving on. The third piece that I did was industry trends, and again, there's not a whole lot for specifically natural science museums or museums of this nature. So I went broader with just nonprofit trending. Funding trends for nonprofits generally are down, at least in the most recent study that I could find. And so I wrote a little piece about the funding and how this is the giving season, and if you make a donation to the organization before the end of the year, that'd be really great. Obviously, it's written to past donors and hopefully potential future donors, and it's written to get them to give a donation before the end of the year, which would hopefully help them reach their goal of funding their expansion project that's currently under construction. The fourth piece was a blog piece by me, just about my experience having worked there, having been there as a volunteer and as just a visitor. It's written for really anybody who's thinking about, this sounds cool, what should I, would it really be interesting? Because everybody wants to have a peer recommendation before you go, right? And the goal was to demonstrate why people would like to not only visit, but also to possibly volunteer there. And the challenge really was, because I have the volunteer and the visitor experience, kind of, in the way that I wrote it, looking back, it's a little bit muddled. It's not clear, this is what you would like as a visitor and this is what you would like as a volunteer. It's a little bit muddy, just looking back if I could write it again. And finally, the piece about organizational news. Currently, the organization, the museum, is building a new expansion building, so they're going to double the size of their organization. This is written for past visitors in the museum who don't know that they're expanding, or visitors who are looking to donate to help fund it. And the goal is obviously to inform past visitors that they're expanding and to help them fund it. The challenge here is that because this is their off season, there aren't a whole lot of, the organization hasn't had an event in a while, and they don't have anything coming up until possibly in April. So this was really the only organizational news going on. Obviously it's a big one because they're doubling their size, but not a whole lot of options here. And finally, just some odds and ends, just kind of the footer. I didn't go with the design of the website that they currently have, just because I don't like it. It's very, I don't know, I guess it's relevant because it's very dirt colored, and the the boxes that I've been showing, those are about the same color as the website. But here I went with more of the white look, and the blue stands out because of the call to action. It shouldn't just be, especially gray. Like if you're gonna, it should stand out a little bit. With links to their Facebook, or their only social medium, and an email, and then contact information like their phone number and fax, and Matt, who is the director, along with your opt-out option. So that's my newsletter.
Questions?
Is anybody there actually